This is a template, and comic strip cartoonists have a little piece of mat board like this that they can quickly make a comic strip so they don't have to figure out the math every single time. The inside area of a comic strip generally is 3 inches tall by 10 inches wide, and comic strips vary a little, but that's basically the shape that a comic strip is going to be. So I'll just make a second one like this. The paper I use is Strathmore Series 500 plate paper, which is kind of expensive, but there are other papers out there. Basically, any kind of Bristol board is a good paper to use for making comic strips. And when you're doing comic strips, you'll do 6 cartoons that are this size every week, and you'll do a Sunday page that's larger and has more panels to it. Alright? So that's that. Now I'll just go right on to the next part. These are rough cartoons. They don't have to be perfect, they just have to get the idea across. Here is Hager charging a castle, and they've positioned an elephant in the way. So Hager is turning to Lucky Eddie, his first mate, and he is saying, "Go back and get a mouse." The idea being that elephants are supposed to be afraid of mice. So what I do is I take this rough idea and I draw it on my pre-cut piece of Bristol board, and I develop it. I try to refine the drawing. I make whatever changes I have to the drawing. So now instead of an elephant, I've got an elephant holding a sword, and I've done a little more detail in the castle. I've made Hager and his crewmates larger, and basically instead of the 5 crewmates, I've only got 4 now. I fired one, and they're holding a battering ram, and here a rain of arrows are coming down on them. And when you're doing cartooning, one of the most important things about cartooning is to know which end of the pencil is for what. This end, of course, is to draw, but this is actually the most important part of the pencil. The most important thing is to be able to go back and erase over and over and over until you've got the character right, until you've got the drawing right. So what I'm going to do is, I didn't do a very good job on Lucky Eddie here, and I'm going to erase him. He's got a kind of a beautiful, elegant neck like a swan, and one big googly eye, and a nose sort of like a piece of fruit or a vegetable, maybe a cassava or an eggplant. And he wears a funnel for a hat, kind of like the Tin Woodsman from The Wizard of Oz. And he has stringy hair. And there, Lucky Eddie's looking quite perplexed. Oh, actually, I made him too big. Well, see, that's why we have an eraser. I'm going to erase him, and then I'm going to put his face back in. I'm going to make him the same height as these other Vikings. There we have Hager and Lucky Eddie and the crew doing battle with a well-armed elephant. So this will now be inked and lettered, and then I'll send it off to the syndicate in New York City. They'll make copies of it and they'll distribute it all over the country and the world, and it'll be appearing in newspapers in about a month and a half.
I'm Jim Davis, and this is Paws Incorporated, where the Garfield comic strip is drawn every day. And we're going to show you how it's drawn. I write the comic strip 1 week out of the month. And what I've learned is that if I can really focus a week on just the writing of the strip, I can create a month's worth of gags. Garfield writes his own material. I simply edit. It's really getting into this almost meditative state. He has to make me laugh first before I write anything else down. Sometimes the gags don't come as easily as other times, so I do use some tricks to get into a funnier mood. It helps to be rested, by the way. I drink coffee to get the heart pounding. Also, I like to read comic books. When it's all complete in my head, then I start the rough drawing. I hear the voice, I see the characters, and I very quickly try to sketch it out before the image goes away. The trick is actually freeze framing Garfield because he's animated in my head, so I have to stop him in just the appropriate position because I only have 3 frames to work within. I set the gag up, I twist it, and then I resolve the situation. When I'm done with the thumbnail sketches, then I take them to Eric for penciling.
Hi, I'm Eric Reeves, and I do the blue line and lettering for the Garfield comic strip. Okay, what I'm doing now is just interpreting Jim's rough sketch and taking it into a more final look. You can draw circles, you can draw Garfield. We use the cotton glove just simply to keep our body oils and grease off the surface while we're drawing. When you make a mistake, it's really no big deal. You just get your eraser out and erase. Once the blue line pencils are done, then I put the lettering on. The Garfield strip is a little different in that we do all our lettering by hand. So when I sit down and do the lettering, you have that hand feel that you don't get from a computer. You know, every E is not exactly the same. It gives it, just a little bit more character to the strip. Once the lettering is done, then my job is over, and I walk it over to Lars, and he starts on the inking.
Hi, my name is Larry Fence. Some people call me Lars, and I ink the Garfield comic strip. And I usually start inking on either the eyes or Garfield's nose, just because it's the center of his face, and the ovals seem to be the most difficult to do, so I get those out of the way right off the bat. The black line just allows you to see the line work more readily. It prints easier. The blue line would actually drop out, so that's basically a map or a guideline to ink by. This headset allows me to magnify the strip so I can see what I'm inking. I have to be able to control the brush precisely, and it's difficult if you can't see the brush. Well, not everybody has to wear these, just the old guys. The ink dries pretty fast, but I've caught myself going faster than the ink dries. And that's it, we're ready for color.
Hi, I'm Tom Howard. I'm the colorist for the Garfield cartoon strip. So I basically have it scanned in the computer, and then it'll become a digital file, and from there it comes into my Photoshop program where I'll start my coloring. The stylus, I can basically get in and color things in a very tight kind of motion. Also, a stylus gives you a little more flexibility for the artist. Rather than using a block of soap or something like that, the stylus gives an artist the same feel as a brush or a pen. We have certain colors that we use for the Garfield characters, the oranges, the browns, the yellows. One Garfield orange, it's a sort of a vibrant orange. It's a 137 is what its number is. There's an open area where the inker hasn't filled in a line or connected a line, the color will come all the way through into the background. So for this particular one, I'm going to kind of fill in a little bit of Garfield here and overlap. And basically I'll fill in as much as I can here to try to find the open spaces and basically fill in like this. Then I'll go back and use white to clean up the edges. Garfield's lip is a Pantone 100, and basically I'll go in here and fill in the open areas here with a brush tool. Looks like we're all done now, and this will go off to Jim for his approval. Here you go, Jim.
This is brilliant. Who wrote this?
You did, Mr. Davis.
Oh, of course. And what you've seen up to now is really easy. Now comes the really tough part, and that is sending the comic strips to the newspapers. This is how we do it.
I always start with the eyeballs, and I always hope he ends up on the page from here. He has these big expressive eyes and these little ears. Over time, his mouth's getting bigger and bigger. That's because he loves to eat, and it makes him a lot more expressive too. He has big full cheeks, like me. And I always worked in a mirror for several years, copying my expressions for Garfield and for John. So as a result, we gradually started to look a lot alike. And of course, he's got this big tummy. I didn't really copy real cats when I designed Garfield. I thought what I thought would be a funny cartoon cat would be truer to the character Garfield than if I tried to draw a real one. Garfield, by the way, is named after my grandfather. His name was James A. Garfield Davis. He was named after the president. And he was a big stubborn man and reminded me in many ways of Garfield. So I thought that would be a good name for him. Put some stripes on the back. Have him wave to you here. There we go. He's happy to see you. Put some ground indications in here. There we go. And the most important part, my signature. Here we go. And that's Garfield. Hi, I'm Jim Davis. I'm a cartoonist, and I'm going to draw my cat Garfield right here on my Wacom Cintiq. Okay, work with me, work with me. I always start with the eyeballs. And that way, after a few years, I have learned that the character will not slop off the edge of the page when I get done. And they say the eyes are the mirrors to the soul. So over the years, Garfield's eyes have been getting bigger and bigger, especially as comic strips have been getting smaller on the newspaper page. For years, too, I worked with a mirror to copy my own expressions on Garfield. And that's why he has the puppy cheeks and everything else like I do. These are the cheeks. Garfield is in thirds. His body actually is the same size as his head. There we go. And the shoulders and the back. And then the legs are another third. I purposely did not look at any real cats when I designed Garfield because I felt what I pictured in my mind was probably more like the personality of the character I wanted to draw than trying to copy a real cat. So because essentially Garfield is a human in a cat suit. He has all the human failings, and I think that's why we identify with him so well. And the cool part about it is, you know, he's not perfect, and he knows that, but he's cool with that. So essentially, I'm holding a mirror to the reader and showing the reader back with all these imperfections, because I think more often than not, when you laugh at Garfield, it's because you're saying, isn't that true? especially when he says things like, I hate Mondays, or I'd like mornings better if they started later, things like that. Okay, here's kind of his shape. We're going to throw some color in here. Let's do that Garfield orange. Believe it or not, this is Federal Yellow. It's one of the most visible colors on the road, and that's why I wanted to do a character who really showed up, especially in the Sunday papers. And let's give him a hot pink nose. There we go. Now I'll go back in and finish those stripes off. They're the curb feelers. I had initially designed Garfield with no stripes, and after 9 years of trying to get syndicated with the newspaper syndicate, an editor said, I think I'll take your strip for syndication, but what about putting stripes on your cat? And I thought, stripes! It never occurred to me. Brilliant! And so, as a result, for 36 years now, I've probably done 10 million stripes as a result of that one stupid suggestion. But now it's part of his personality. All right, there we go. Let's do a little bit of shading in here too. A little airbrush action here. Kind of round them out. There we go. Yeah. This is fun with the new art programs. This would have taken weeks pulling up other tools, mixing other inks and things like that. So now we have all the tools right here on our screen. It makes it a lot more fun. Here we go. We'll do a little shading in here on the ground. All right. And I know, Garfield cannot just stand there. He's got to say something. Oh yeah, let's do this. And one more little touch. Here we go. And let's make this official. And there you have it, my cat Garfield.
All right, this is where I do most of my drawing. This is a Wacom Cintiq. That's the name of the screen. It works with a regular computer, but I can just draw on the screen much the way I would draw on paper. So here's one that I've already done. And here's one that's before the color is added. And I'll just give you an idea of what the drawing process looks like. First step is usually a rough. So I create a new layer. This would make sense to people who use Photoshop. I'm just using regular Photoshop software. And if I were to try to add a character here, I would pick my pen size and my color, and I might be drawing, let's say, Dilbert looking at him from behind. First draft would be very rough, just to kind of get the general idea. Might look something like this. Maybe he's got his arm like that. All right, and then I look at it, and of course, I'm thinking the same thing you're doing, which is, that looks terrible. But it doesn't matter, because in the second phase, what I do is I lighten that layer. It's called a layer. And then when I do the finish art, I'll come in tighter. And if this were the real thing, I would make sure that my lines were a little better and a little truer to the character. I'll just do this quickly so you can get the idea. All right, this would be a lot better if I were taking my time. And we'll just give them a nose and then I'll show you the next step. So, and then I can remove the rough draft layer. If there's something I don't like, let's say I've got a line that doesn't belong, I can just make it go away. Let's say I don't want Dilbert here. Let's say I want him smaller, and over there, I can just move him around. And if I want him facing the other direction, I can just turn him that way. So we've got the kind of flexibility you could never have on paper, obviously. And then, when you reach the point where you want to add the color, this used to be a whole long, terrible process. But now, not so much. I'll show you. Swatches. Now all I have to do is choose my color, and oh, this one would have to be changed to a different mode. It's a little more like computer programming than it is like drawing these days, because there's so much processing that goes on. All right, so now that I got it set up, if I want to add color, it's just one tap. Like that. And let's do his shirt. That process would have taken a long time in the old days.
When Ryan wants to begin a new comic strip, he'll spend a lot of time first sketching and developing an interesting character. He'll draw his character in multiple poses and from multiple different angles. Next, he'll create a rough draft of a comic strip. He will plan out all of the action and the text. When he feels ready to begin his final copy of the comic strip, he will trace a panel stencil that he created to Bristol board. Then he will trace his rough draft onto the Bristol board. He likes to use a non-photo blue pencil for this step. Once he's finished tracing, he will then darken in and refine the drawing with pencil. At this point, he doesn't need his draft anymore, but he refers to it. Next, Ryan switches to ink and does all of his lettering first. Once the lettering is finished, Ryan will begin to ink the strip, doing just the outlines first. He likes to use Speedball India ink for this step, and he uses a dip pen, which is just a nib placed into a holder that can be dipped into the ink. After tracing all of the outlines, Ryan will then fill in all of the solid areas with ink using a paintbrush. Then, after all of the ink is completely dry, Ryan will erase his pencil lines using a kneaded eraser. Now, when necessary, Ryan will make corrections using white gouache paint on a brush. Instead of drawing a new title label for each comic strip, Ryan copies and then attaches the label to the top of each new strip that he makes. And finally, he will use inking techniques to add value, which is shading, and detail to his comic strip. So as you just saw, there were 12 steps Ryan had to take to complete his comic strip, and when he's finished, he then scans and emails the strip for publication.
I'm a graduate of the Columbus College of Art and Design. I graduated in advertising with an illustration minor. I worked for several years in advertising, but I always wanted to cartoon. I did some cartooning for a magazine, actually a weekly newspaper in Columbus, Ohio. I was able to open another door, and it opened for me in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was a cartoonist for them at the Cincinnati Post for 22 years. Editorial cartoon is a cartoon with a point of view, trying to find a little bit of humor in it, but typically it's going to fall on an opinion page, so it wants to have, and the editor wants to have an opinion associated with the cartoon. It might not be funny, but many times I'm hoping that it is. When I got into editorial cartooning back in the early 80s, I think I was right at the beginning of the Reagan administration. And so I've worked through all of the presidents since then. And they're all a challenge, and some of them are easier than others. I started as a one-panel cartoonist doing editorial cartoons, and so I got that science of that type of gag down. I felt very comfortable then moving on to doing Moderately Confused, which is social commentary on a different level, but appearing on comic pages. I'm contracted to do 3 to 4 editorial cartoons every week, and I do 6 daily panels for Moderately Confused. So it's a total of 9 to 10 cartoons I do every week. I work 4 weeks in advance on Moderately Confused, whereas an editorial cartoon, I put it out the next day. You have to have thick skin in this business, but it's so rewarding, it's so much fun. And people always ask, so what's your favorite cartoon? And it's the one I did today.
There are 4 steps to draw an editorial cartoon. I'll show you how I do it. The first step is the hardest, getting the idea. Good ideas are hard to find. Bad ideas are a dime a dozen. I like to draw a good idea. Now, I can get a good idea from watching TV. I can watch on a computer. And a lot of times they just pop into my mind, like when I'm walking down the street or washing dishes or cooking in the kitchen. You never know. When that happens, I like to jot them down right away. So I had this idea of a guy with a lemonade stand, and I jot these down real quick. And this guy is going to be saying, "I'd love to buy your product, but first I want to know your politics." I know how I'm going to do it. I'll put it in a thought balloon, and I just make these shorthand little notes just as a way for me to remember this later when I go to the tracing. The tracing is done on tracing paper, and this is where it's kind of where the magic happens. And I got a guy here. This is the guy. He's talking. He's got his hands in his pocket. He's very relaxed. This is where I can really plan my cartoon, because I'm going to use this as a basis to ink over this for the final rendering. This is the lemonade stand. And again, the guy is saying, "I'd love to buy your product, but I need to know your politics first." That'll be in a speech balloon here. Make this a little kid. I'm not going to make it a full-grown adult. It wouldn't make sense. So this is a little kid. I'll put in details here. but I don't want to put in too much. So after I get it down on tracing paper, I have to render it. I have to make it in a line that will reproduce in a newspaper and look good on a telephone at the same time. So this is the modern world of cartooning. They have to look good in many applications. I've seen my cartoons on billboards. Next step is to render the cartoon. I will render the cartoon in Micron marker and India ink, depending on how I want to do it. It's all technique. It's the feeling. I love the feeling of a pen on smooth paper. So I'll do that, and then after I have rendered it, I scan this drawing into my computer. I add color, I fix misspellings, and I'm a horrible speller. I can move things around, play with the composition, and then I send that cartoon to the syndicate, to Patreon, to whoever. I can make prints, signed prints. That's the beauty of this combination of old style and new technology. I always figure if it was good enough for Van Gogh, it's good enough for me. But I do like the convenience of a computer. So that's how it happens, and try to do it yourself. Have some fun with it. I'm Bob Englehart. I'm an editorial cartoonist.
I first got the idea for Dennis in 1950, when my son Dennis was 2.5 years old and doing his normal 2.5-year-old thing, and someone at that time said, "You know, your kid's a menace." And I thought, well, Dennis, a menace? And, you know, the words fell so beautifully together that I thought, what a beautiful idea for a panel. So there I was, the day when opportunity knocked in the form of a 2.5-year-old tow-headed boy named Dennis. And I opened the door, and the kid's been bugging me ever since. For 30 years, I've been working for that little fella. He never becomes a juvenile delinquent. He's always kind of in that blessed age that's protected by the law. He's too little to hit and too young to put in jail and too big to put back in the playpen, and he has kind of things his own way.
Okay, I left Warner Brothers. I had the good fortune of meeting Hank Ketchum, and he liked my work and hired me as his assistant. So for a period of time, I drew the Dennis the Menace Sunday page and illustrated a number of Dennis children's books. And he was a fun time in my life and a fun character to draw. And fortunately, my animation background helped me a great deal, and Hank had been a Disney animation before he got into newspaper comics, newspaper cartoons, and then the Dennis comic strip. So he was impressed with my background as young as I was, and gave me a chance to be his assistant. So I ended up drawing the little guy for about 4 years, and it was a fun time. Hank was a great guy to work for. Cocky little kid, and as a cartoon character, and the real Dennis was somewhat similar. So I'll put a little color on them. And he was a real towhead in real life as well as a cartoon character. Working for Hank was when I really learned to draw, because my drawing board was just a next alcove from his. We had a cabana by a large swimming pool at his home, and he pretty much was right there checking what I did and giving me invaluable tips on how to be a better cartoonist. And I've never regretted that experience. But I wanted to have a comic strip of my own. That's how I met Hank. I had a teenage idea while I was working at Warner Brothers and had no idea, no knowledge on how to submit a comic strip idea to a newspaper syndicate, and it was suggested I write to Hank. He invited me to his ranch in Carmel Valley, so I left Warner Brothers, drove to Carmel Valley after a very nice invitation from him. He interviewed me, and out of the blue said, "Would you like to be my assistant?" So I shelved my teenage comic strip idea for a number of years, and Hank had moved to Switzerland, and I was working in Carmel Valley with Dennis, so I fired off my teenage comic strip idea to a number of syndicates. Unfortunately for me, King Features liked the idea and put me under contract, and next thing I knew, I'm drawing cute little girl, all ponytail, and eventually about 300 newspapers daily and Sunday, and before my 30th birthday, so I was a very, very lucky young man. A little color on her, see what she's got to say. I guess there was a story floating around that Dennis was, our ponytail was actually Dennis's babysitter, but not true. Both of them are very important parts of my life, obviously. Here they both are. Not quite perfect drawings, but they are quick. And it's been fun all these years.
And explain to us a little bit about how maybe you designed him, and also, has he evolved over the years?
Well, he's evolved because he started out as a college character.
Okay.
Based on my experiences at the University of Missouri. And then the Korean War heated up and I had to put him in. So there's one big change.
Mm-hmm.
He was tall and lanky, just like my friend David Hornaday.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's more squat and compact because it's just easier to fill up the space with him. He always has 3 freckles.
Okay. And they're always placed in that same spot too, aren't they?
Well, wherever my pen hits the page, yeah.
Okay, but 3, and that's it.
That's right.
Actually, I don't really draw about the Army. I draw about funny guys that happen to be in the Army. They could be in a machine shop, or they could be policemen, or whatever. You know, there's just you have to have the setup of authority and resistance to authority.
Sergeant Snorkel is modeled after a sergeant that Mort served under as an infantryman in World War II. This sergeant really worked his troops heavily every day over the obstacle course, and Mort frequently refers to those times in his strip.
Could you draw Sergeant Snorkel?
Sergeant Snorkel, sure.
Oh, great.
One of the things that's interesting every now and then when you're talking with young kids is to get them to identify characters just by one line. Like that, I'd say, "Who's that?" You know, and so I'm always hoping they'll come up immediately and say, "Sergeant Snorkel." One kid said, "Bullwinkle." So I stopped doing that. In the beginning, I couldn't figure out where to put Sergeant Snorkel's tooth. Mm-hmm. At one time, he had 2 or 3 fangs, and one was on the bottom, one was on the top. Little by little, he developed so he only has 1 fang. And when we went to do an animated show, they couldn't figure out what to do with his tooth when he turned, so his tooth travels all over his mouth. Well, there's Sergeant Snorkel. 300 pounds of pure fun.
Well, I had a Sarge whose name was Octavius Savu when I was in the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And he was about the meanest, toughest guy you ever can imagine. One day after a particularly tough day, going through the obstacle course, we came back, and on our pillows was a poem that he'd written to my boys. And I thought, what an incongruous thing to happen. You know, that guy's actually got a heart. So I based this character, Sergeant Snorkel, on Sergeant Savu. And he does have a heart.
I used to do magazine cartoons a lot, and a lot. And for some reason, I always loved cavemen because they were so stupid and simple, you know. But I could never sell them to a magazine. One night, when I was going home from work, I said, I think I'll go home and create a nationally famous comic strip. And everybody laughed, and they said, why don't you do one on cavemen? You can't sell them anyplace else. And I figured that was a mandate. So that evening, I went home, had about 4 beers, and sat down and created a caveman character, which the obvious name with simplicity would be BC.
The idea for Marmaduke started about 25 years ago. So he's a much older dog than most people realize. And my mother had a dog named Bruno, and I had been drawing some dog cartoons for some magazines at that time. And my mother's dog happened to be a clown, a funny dog, got into a lot of mischief, and served as a very good living model for Marmaduke. Well, one of the most satisfying things about doing Marmaduke all these years is eventually I became a dog. It's true. I began to think like a dog. I had to get myself into the character. and I find that dogs have a lot more character than I ever dreamed.
You know, the Blondie comic strip is in its 50th year. It started in 1930, back when Blondie was known as Blondie Boopadoop, and Dagwood was a minor character. Her boyfriend in those days was a fellow named Hi-Ho Hennepin.
Now, Dagwood was a wealthy guy, and as a matter of fact, because Blondie entered his life, he was completely disinherited by his father and relegated to a middle-class type of living, and I believe this is when the strip took off, when they got into the kitchen and into the domestics that they're in now. If we can make somebody smile or chuckle or laugh in the beginning of their day, especially in today's world, then we feel like we've made their day a little bit better. And that's what it's all about.
Then in the late 1960s, two more comic strips emerged that were to deal with various social and political thoughts. The first was We Pals, created by cartoonist Maury Turner.
Well, this is one of my favorite cartoons. It more or less summarizes the philosophy of We Pals, and in it we tell a little story. And in this particular story, it's color unconscious. In the first panel, the pals made a discovery outside the clubhouse. Nipper asked Oliver, "What's that, Oliver?" Oliver's holding a chameleon. "It's a chameleon, Nipper." "A what?" "A chameleon. It can change colors whenever it wants to." "Oh, I don't believe that." So to prove that the chameleon could indeed change colors at will, they put it on a lot of different colors, and sure enough, the chameleon kept changing colors until finally, hey, the poor thing has passed out from exhaustion. But then Diz says, always be proud of your color.
The idea for Mama occurred to me about 4 years before it actually appeared in print. This was back east. I lived about 10 minutes from my mother. Saw her an average of twice a week at least, and spoke to her on the phone about 5-6 times a week. But for some reason, 2 days went by without any contact. And on the afternoon of the second day, the phone rang in my studio, and a voice that sounded vaguely familiar, but had a kind of an edge in it, said, "Hello, Mr. Lazarus?" I said, "Yes." She said, "This is your mother, Frances Lazarus, calling to tell you that my phone number is still 555-1667. And she hung up. I called her back about 5 minutes later, and I said, "Hello, Mom." She said, "Yes, who is this?" I said, "This is your son, Mel." She said, "Oh, really? What's the occasion?" Well, I realized that I had just been party to two of the best gags I've ever heard. I mean, stuff that you can't write. That was the very genesis of the strip.
Prince Valiant was created by Hal Foster in 1937. In collaboration with Hal Foster, who now lives in Florida, John Cullen Murphy draws Prince Valiant in his Connecticut studio. John recently reflected on the meaning of this famous comic strip hero.
In the Prince Valiant feature, we uphold what is good and what is right. This is a period of history that was marked primarily by the code of chivalry. And we're involved with King Arthur and Sir Lancelot and Sir Gawain. And, of course, Prince Valiant takes his place with these great knights of the Round Table.
Certainly the most detailed and illustrative comic strip of all time, Prince Valiant must have extensive color guides for the engraver.
Now, I'm limited to the colors that I can use, to these 64 different colors, variations of red and blue and yellow. But it's amazing the amount of color you can still get out of it. It's really quite a bit of fun doing this, although it's sometimes it's like doing a children's book, a coloring book.
The artist that has been drawing Prince Valiant since 1970, Mr. John Cullen Murphy. John, thanks so much for having us.
Welcome. Welcome, Prince.
Yes, that's great. As I said, you've been drawing the strip since 1970,
That's
but
right.
you don't write the strip. Your son does that.
My son does, yeah. We collaborate very closely by phone and through the mails, and he writes me a script, the narrative, and describing the locations, the dialogue, and everything else. And then I letter it onto the page and start drawing.
Okay, let's take a look at something you're working on right now.
I start off putting in all these panels and figuring out where I'm going to have the lettering and that sort of thing, and then I put up the logo and decide in what way to capture as much drama out of the particular scene as possible.
Yeah, I've always admired your magnificent use of blacks, like I see in this first panel here.
Oh, well, that was an easy one because it's by firelight, and you have these long cast shadows, and that gives a
an added sense of drama to the thing. Also, some of the gestures. It's a static scene, but so I try to enliven it as much as I can.
Sure. Now, I notice down here you have your layout with pencil, and it's very rough at this point. Now, what would you do from here on?
Well, I would. I'm not quite sure about this picture yet. I'm still trying to make my composition, to make that as interesting as possible. These are going to be outdoor scenes, so we're not going to have all that great black in it, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I have to do research on the types of clothing that these people are wearing, what the action is, what they're actually doing. This one, I got to do some more research on a special type of canoe that was used at that time.
That was my next question. Do you keep all this in your head? You have to these beautiful
Lord.
backgrounds and the elaborate detail.
No, I travel a lot and take pictures all the time, and I also go to the library here, the local library, and do an awful lot of research there. In addition, I have a great library here.
Yeah, I would think you would have to with all this, like I say, this detail.
Yeah.
Now, this is the actual original size, and this is the actual size that it appears in the newspaper, right?
Yeah,
down
that's
here.
right.
So
You
it's
got
upside down. Okay, how about that?
That's
okay,
good.
And that.
Again, this is you mentioned the use of blacks before. Well, this is an ideal situation.
Yeah.
Again, not only is it firelight, but we're in a cave, so you can't beat that for the access to blacks.
It's just beautiful. This is the part I've been waiting for. Would you please draw Prince Valiant and explain to our audience how you construct him and why you draw him the way you do? I'm going to get out of your way.
Well, of course, I didn't create him. It was done by Hal Foster back in 1937.
He's over 50 years?
Yeah. And, the prince himself must be well into his 60s, but he doesn't show his age. This is Prince Valiant. You notice his nose, the aquiline type nose, which is a distinguishing feature of him. The other outstanding feature about him is his hair. Which was quite shocking back in 1937 when you had a hero with long hair. Now it looks quite conservative, actually. It was the Beatles, really, I guess, that made the long hair famous, and his hair is more like the Beatles than anyone else, actually. Sort of a page boy bob.
His looks haven't changed much over the years, have they?
No. He doesn't age too much, although, as I said earlier, he's probably in his 60s by this time, but unlike you and me, he doesn't show his age.
Yeah, he looks terrific.
I'm thinking of putting a few gray hairs in here occasionally, maybe a couple of darker circles under his eyes.
Now, when you were doing your inking on your actual strip, you use a pen. What kind of pen do you use?
Yes, I use a Nibs, 303 is the number of it, and I stick it into a wooden holder and draw. It's very old-fashioned.
And a brush for large black areas.
That's right. Yeah.
Famous large black areas.
Yeah. Of course, unlike this, I have it rather carefully penciled first, before I go into the ink.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be wasting a lot of paper.
Yeah.
But he has a very strong chin, as you notice, and he was knighted by the time he was about 18 or 19 years of age for his heroism against the Saxons, fighting against the Saxons back in the 5th century. And he's married, a father of 5 children. He's married to a queen, Lita of the Misty Isles.
Okay.
And here he is.
That's great. That's just great.
The man who has sketched Andy and Florrie off into the drunken night so often is Reg Smythe. As the man who created Andy and has sustained him through 20 years of boozing, betting and borrowing, Reg surely ought to qualify for the most elegant of graphics studios. But this is it. This corner by the fire, this easy chair and drawing pad are all Reg needs. Apart from the extraordinary and persistent imagination to think up thousands of jokes around the one flat-capped character. Reg has drawn no one else for 20 years, not since the demise of his Speedway comic, Skid Sprocket. Skid crashed, but Andy became a national institution within a few years.
I'm going to sit down here and start the finished drawings. I do all the finished drawings in pencil, and then my son Greg does the ink work. And we've got quite a great system. It seems to be working. I put the lettering in first. You can be a good cartoonist and a bad writer, you'll never make it. But a good writer and a bad cartoonist often comes out on top. I fell in love with comic strips as a little boy, about 3 or 4 years old. My father used to read them to me. He'd say on Sunday morning, he'd say, go down and get the paper, Mort. I'll read you the comics. We'd get in bed, he'd put his arm around me. He started reading me the comics, and his favorite was Moon Mullins. And he laughed so hard that tears would come down his cheeks. About 10 years old, dropped out of school. They couldn't get me to go back. And there it is, all ready for Greg to ink.
You all done?
I am all done.
It's all in a day's work.
I'll take the artwork, line it up. I rule lines for the lettering. The angles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4 is the middle. Get the lettering pen, still dipping pins in ink the old-fashioned way. This is very exciting. Maybe we'll be lucky and I'll splatter all over this and start swearing. I've got a circle template to get a perfect circle, like for a ball. Don't do that for the noses. Make sure the swoop is nice and swoopy. In Beetle, we've kind of established this style. One of the things that most people probably wouldn't think about are the balloons, and we like to have them nicely shaped and rounded. So, dip the pen, some ink on it. And even as I'm doing this, I'll make some changes to the lines. Because as you do it in the starker black and white, you start to see things a little differently. The sound of the pen against the paper makes a little bit of a scratching sound. That's a sound that I remember so much from my childhood, and it was just like Dad's working, you know, I don't know, it was a comforting sound somehow. It's the sound of cartooning to me. Freckles. It's Beetle. People get familiar with the characters. They're easily identifiable. You know, Beetle's the lazy one, Sarge is the big tough guy. Anybody who follows the strip at all knows that. I think the familiarity is really important. I think that is one reason why it's lasted as long as it has. People come to know the characters and think of them as friends, as my father would say. Beetle is so, every line is sort of important. It's spare. Ink dries within a minute or two. Okay, a few little touches here to make sure the lines are connected. Ta-da, one finished strip.
This character was based on a cartoonist, actually.
Okay.
He was a New Yorker cartoonist. His name was Otto Saglo.
Otto Saglo, the Little King.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was about 5 feet high, maybe wasn't that high.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always grumpy. Yeah, it sounds just like a dog. And so when I created Otto, I thought, I'm going to base his character on my Otto.
What kind of advice could you give our friends at home if they wanted to come up with their own comic strip? Like, you know, you come up with so many, and you've created so many successful ones. Like I said, High and Lois.
Well, Hager is a Viking businessman whose sacking and looting is his specialty, and he has he of course wears the helmet, and he has a beautiful nose, just like a beautiful little orange. And of course, Vikings need to have good vision, so he has these two little raisins. They're actually, if you look at them in the strip, they're perfect little raisins for eyes.
Right.
It's a little bloodshot because, you know, Vikings party.
Uh-huh.
And he's got the beard. He's got the beautiful red beard with occasional gray hair brought on by family life more than sacking and looting.
Sure.
And
now that's interesting. What you're doing there, that's a little shadowing effect.
Little shadowing.
Uh-huh.
Sir John Tennille, little inking technique.
Sure.
And of course I'm using a marker here, but in the strip it would all be done with a dip pen.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you. We're using marker, of course, for television. We want our friends at home to see it. But you use a dip pen, is that correct?
Yes.
With a waterproof ink?
Waterproof ink, and basically, here I'll show you, I use Higgins ink, which I leave out overnight.
Okay, now why is that?
Because I like it to become thick and gunky like a stew. I really
okay.
do. You know, you like to let some of the water evaporate out of the thing, and then as you do that, it gets a nice gunky consistency.
And
And
it goes on the page better for you? Is
it
that
goes
why you
on
like
the
that?
page better. And another trick that I've learned about inking is to wash the pen nibs when you first get them, because pen nibs are stored with vegetable oil sprayed on them so that they don't rust in the box. And if you take a pen nib right from the art store and start to
put it right on the salad.
Put it right on
no, that's not. No. Okay.
It'll a big glob of ink will roll right off the pen onto your page.
I see. Okay.
If you take off that, it will. You get rid of that problem.
That's interesting.
So,
that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Now you're drawing Helga.
There's Helga. Yes.
This is
yes.
Hager's wife.
Hager's wife, based on my mother.
Is that right?
My father based all the cartoon characters on family members.
I see.
Helga was based on my my mother, and the gags nowadays I base on my wife, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
And Hager was based on himself. My father was a big man with a big red beard.
Now who gets the best of who? Hager or Helga?
Always Helga. You'll
That's
notice
right.
if you ever look at the comic strip, Helga's horns are just a little bit bigger than Hager's, and
Okay.
and
There's
that's
a reason for that.
That's why, you know, she's the real boss in the house.
Okay. Now there's another character in the strip that is kind of his little cohort of Hagar's, and that's Lucky Eddie.
Lucky Eddie, the least lucky Viking. You know,
Okay.
there's that saying: if I didn't have bad luck, I would have no luck at all.
Luck at all, right?
And Lucky Eddie was based on my father's brother, Edmund.
All right.
Edmund Brown, who never had very much luck. But we loved him dearly, and he was just a great guy, very much like Lucky Eddie, a nice, affable, sweet guy.
Right. He means well, and he just doesn't seem to come out on top, does he?
He means well, and no, nothing ever quite works out. And so here's Lucky Eddie, and
what is that helmet? That is a great helmet he's wearing.
He's obviously been eating too many sunflower seeds. There's a flower popping out of the top. So.
Chris, could you give our friends at home a tip on how to create their own comic strip? Any just, I know it's tough, there's a lot that goes into it, but just any one tip that you can give them in the way of success?
Well, you know, I would say that as far as coming up with an idea, the best advice I was ever given was by Charles Schulz, who said, draw what you love.
Charles Schulz, of course, from Peanuts fame.
Of Peanuts, and what a great man he is. And he told me to forget the gimmicks, draw from your heart, draw something that you love. And that's certainly what my dad did when he created Hager.
I was looking for a universal character, one that didn't need to be explained, that anybody anywhere in the world could recognize, the same way they recognize the cowboy, the Indian, the clown. I've always had a fondness for Vikings. Goes back to a Swedish Antipine, I suppose. And how many people walk around with horns on their head?
Hager's a funny little fat Viking. He's sort of a Dark Ages businessman, really. Except he's in sacking and looting. And it's a very, very competitive business. And he has a family that keeps him busy overrunning Europe and bringing back bacon for the rest of the family. There's some people that even say that there's a mild resemblance between Hager and myself. I don't quite see that.
This cartoonist bears one of the most famous names in the newspaper world as he draws Mutt and Jeff, older than most of us and still going strong, as is the man who first created them, Bud Fisher. This is the cartoonist who has carried on brilliantly since the death of Billy DeBeck, chiefly with the assistance of this odd little fellow from the hills. Snuffy Smith and his jug of corn squeezing. His patient mountain wife, Lousy. Barney Google, currently with the Navy. And Sparkplug, the world's worst racing horse, with Rosebud the Keeper, nearly forgotten today. All the characters of Fred Lasswell Jr., and keeping him very busy on the job. Many cartoonists are serious painters in their private lives, like this one, who helped start the change from slapstick humor to a serious story. In 1919, he began the adventures of a typical American family, led by a plump little man with a kindly heart. Uncle Walt himself. Skeezix, who has been growing up on paper for 20 years. His wife, Nina, Auntie Blossom, and the youngest generation of the family, with only us middle-aged fellows to remember Walt's gasoline buggy of 1920. Frank King, the man whose comic strip we know as Gasoline Alley. Here, one of the comparative newcomers who began his strip during the gangster era, with that guardian of law and order who has been shot full of holes, chucked over cliffs, frozen in ice, with never a dent in his manly profile. Detective Dick Tracy, honest Dick Tracy's partner, Junior, and Tess Trueheart, still waiting for Dick after 13 years, to say nothing of such charming people as Flat Top, the Brow, Gravel Gertie, and Measles. And so we bid farewell to Chester Gould as he dreams up some new villain called Octopus Puss or Toon Face. This is the artist who began the fantastic world of the future idea. Handsome Buck Rogers, who sails around from planet to planet, squirting disintegrator rays in every direction, together with Buddy, Dr. Hewer, and a goodly supply of beautiful females. Dick Calkins is the father of these people on paper who gallivant around with Buck Rogers in the 25th century. This dark-haired young man is respected as one of the outstanding craftsmen with his pen, as he tells his remarkably intelligent adventure yarns of men at war. The serious-minded Terry, Flip Corkin, copied from the real-life flyer Lieutenant Colonel Cochran, the Dragon Lady who plays Mata Hari to Pat Ryan, and some of the nastiest Jack villains out of captivity. Milton Cannon, whose careful drawing and observation of life have made him one of the leaders of the cartoon industry. Each year increases the popularity of the paper people created by this easygoing gentleman who enjoys himself as much as the characters that he draws. None other than Dagwood Bumpstead, who never took a bath in peace and privacy in a dozen years. Blondie, the brains of the family, Dagwood's neighbor with whom he's always in trouble, his pride and joy, the children, and this is the cross that Dagwood bears in the form of the 5 puppies, and the 12 layers of indigestion known as the Dagwood Special. Chick Young, who goes cheerfully on, and with Blondie and Dagwood provides the nation with some of its most innocent nonsense. And although many of the most popular are not shown, these leaders are typical of the wide variety of humor and sentiment that makes up the cartoon parade. Van Buren, with his characters of small-town life called Abby and Slats, with Becky for glamour, and Bathless Groggins just for his own sweet-smelling self. The famous Ham Fisher, who provides his stories for the sporting fan. Honest Joe Palooka, the heavyweight champ with the heart of gold. And the odd little character called Max, who is neither deaf nor dumb, but who just doesn't like to talk. This is Hal Foster, who represents a new trend in the comics that has never been criticized, with his educational romances of the days of old called Prince Valiant. Likewise among the leaders is Harold Gray, whose heroine is the brave little girl who battles it out alone, Orphan Annie and her dog Sandy. We visit the artist who is perhaps the leading favorite of college students and grown-ups who like their humor exaggerated to the extent of fairy tales. Little Abner of Dog Patch, USA. The unbeatable Mammy. Pappy, whose chief happiness lies in turnip preserves. Sadie Hawkins and her father, and Available Jones, who will do anything for a price. Few people in the world outside the United States would understand these dream people of Al Cap's imagination. But in our country, Little Abner brings laughter to millions of readers every day. And there you have them, a few of the 20 or 30 leading comic strip makers of our time. The old controversy as to whether comics are good for us or bad for us goes steadily on. But the people on paper bring simple amusement to those who weary of real life in the American passing parade.
You know what? I need to take a break, honestly. I've been like at this since like 10 o'clock this morning, so I should be getting some more paper in like an hour, so check back later. Personalize it?
Yeah, to Josh.
Josh?
Hanson. Hanson.
S-O-N?
Yeah.
There's 16 steps. 5
him not to be noticed. I think he just wanted to eat. Yeah.
Well, it's the weird thing though is that autographs are worth so much. Yeah, so it's like, you know, it's just a weird connection. It's like, you were really famous.
You like that?
You know, I think you probably really famous.
It was done for a local group, but we're going to be putting on a show in costume, but they want us not doing it because of licensing issues. It's the 35th anniversary, and they just started this year charging for fees as they relate. So there's going to be a hefty fine if you don't get the license fee.
Yeah, I've been looking at a local comic shop for a while.
No, well, these are the first printing on this paper. If you've seen it in your local shop, then you would have seen it on newsprint. Yeah. Oh, that's the. I'm sorry, that's the one we signed. Yeah. Okay. Take a look at this one. So the other ones, we actually asked them not to distribute the other ones because we weren't as happy with the printing. So this is the first printing. Do we want this page? So, I don't know what
A little boy and his shaggy dog have captured the hearts of the public from around the globe.
Come on, Ruff. The coast is clear. And he's reaching for the cookie jar. She goes, freeze, partner. I don't want you to spoil your appetite. But you're making vegetable lasagna. My appetite's already spoiled.